This video is sponsored by Green Day because what is the journey within esports? Nothing more than just the boulevard of broken dreams. Okay, in reality though, this really isn't sponsored by Green Day. I got no affiliation with that band whatsoever. I am a rock enthusiast, as you guys might be able to see by my various shirts, but I got nothing to do with that band. I just really like that joke, wanted to put that out there. So, today's video is going to be on a topic that isn't really going to be coming up on anyone's minds right now, but it's something I'm particularly curious in, so it's going to be one of those, no one's going to see this thing, but hey, I might as well just do it anyway. And this is going to be speculation on what Riot is going to do in the pre-season of Season 6 when as far as it comes to Marksmen. So for those of you who don't know, there's actually been an update to Riot's website where they list off the upcoming reworks, upcoming updates to champions, to no, it's basically to the champions one. And they've recently added on the update for Marksman update. Now, Marksman is considered a specific type of champion in the game that deals most of their damage at a distance. They are a range champion, okay? So they're like, we're talking upwards of like 400 range or more. 550 is about the average. These tend to be 80 carries because these champions are designed with the intention of having their damage come primarily through auto attacks rather than spells, though you can have a caster 80 carry / marksman that does a lot of spell damage, but primarily it's through the auto attacks. With these champions, you're going to be building things like attack damage, attack speed, crit chance, and armor penetration to help improve the efficiency of dealing damage with your auto attacks, as well as boost the power of those auto attacks and shred through tanks. Well, not really insta-gib, but 2-3 shot other squishies on the enemy team. That is what a marksman is. Examples of these as far as champions goes would be Lucian, Ashe, Misfortune, Twitch, Urgot, little different build as far as that goes, Ezreal, Corki, Caitlyn, Draven. I just want to see if I can name them all at this point. Callista. And alright, you get the idea. You get the idea of what I mean when I say a marksman at this point. Now, Riot is broadening or blanketing all like this particular class of champions as being up for an update, and so that raises a question as, well, what do you mean an update? Are you talking about like, every champion is going to be reworked in some way? Are we talking about like an item overhaul? Now, if you actually like do some research, and if you go to surrenderat20.net, currently right now as of September 27th. I'm going to also link this in the description below. You can look at a collection of some tweets from a Riot employee who goes by the name, or the alias rather, Scruffy, who kind of offers a couple of small insights as to what they're thinking about or what they mean when they're talking about a marksman update. A couple of these tweets read as follows. This is again on the Surrenderat20 website, but again, they're like basically directly quoting the guy. In regards to what the Marksman update means, Scruffy says, like Juggernauts, a bunch of champ changes and a bunch of item changes. Mostly focused on making each ADC have a unique role / playstyle. Also making ADC item choices not so lame. And then, a couple of these he's actually responding to a couple of people on Twitter, which we don't actually see what he's responding to. He says, yeah, a bunch of them will get new skills or mechanics. More details soon. Don't want to overpromise anything that's still work in progress. He notes on the point for items for Marksman as this: yes, we hope for a nearly full overhaul. Some old ones modified, some new ones. Yes, we're trying to set up multiple items that will compete for a slot, so there aren't situations like Bloodthirster OP or IE OP. Yeah, Runeance is getting updated, so yes, crit items and effects will be updated. Okay, so in this exchange on Twitter, to fans, to curious inquisitors, this Riot employee who's behind the process and who's saying as much as he can on the subject matter, okay, is saying that there's going to be a fairly massive overhaul on a couple of champions, but namely to the whole item structure, which is going to affect the champion pool, by the way. Some champions are going to be modified to better fit this particular setup, probably in order to support them, things like that. And so the next question is, what exactly do they mean when they talk about, okay, the item, this overhaul? What possible direction could they go on into? All right, they want to have it so that other items are competing for a specific slot, probably so that 80 carries can, not only just be like, okay, do you not have any wave clear? Yes, then a static shiv is your attack speed item, crap like that. As well as how, he also mentions that crit chance is going to be in the work. And so what possible ways could they be, adjusting these, changing these? The only real speculation or evidence in which we can base on such speculation comes from Ash's rework, okay? Now, the reason why I stress this point, or rather go to this particular example in the first place, okay, is because if you recall in her rework, Ash and crit work in a way that hasn't been seen before in League of Legends, and it focuses more on steadily ramping up consistent damage given a criteria is met. Over, let me make sure that there's like an ad in the background that wants to play. I'm just gonna make sure that the recorder doesn't pick it up. Rather than having her have these spikes of damage, okay, through randomly critting someone, instead she has this steady ramping damage that's supposed to come on up through it and amp up her damage, but make it consistent. So, in a way, her kind of system focuses more on, it's less about critting a few times for a huge spike of damage, but critting consistently at less damage. But because you're critting consistently, you're actually going to be getting more damage out because of how consistent each one is, okay? So let's go ahead and read through Ash's passive, which is Frost Shot. Her basic attacks and abilities apply frost to effective enemies, and they slow them for a percentage for 2 seconds. And now, while enemies are frosted, her basic attacks against those frosted enemies, so enemies affected by her passive, her basic attacks against them will always critically strike, and they go for value, and their damage is going to increase by 10%. So she starts out at 110% crit damage, so that's way lower than like I think it's 150, maybe 200% chance that most other champions will crit for. But then it's that 10% base plus critical strike chance. Okay, so that value there, all right, so that's where you take whatever percentage crit you have and you make it just a flat number. So if you build, let's say, an IE in a stack Shiv, 40. Okay, so you have 40% crit chance, that's going to be plus 40. And then that times 1 plus your bonus critical damage. Now, the only item in the game that currently affects critical damage, and therefore is relevant to Ashe and her kit, is Infinity Edge, which gives you an extra 50% bonus. Yeah, okay, that's right. So champions crit for 200% crit damage normally, but Infinity Edge makes you crit for an extra 50%. Okay, so 1 plus the 50, so about, I guess 51 is the number that we're going for here, or maybe they calculate like how much bonus crit damage it would actually be. I'm not sure on that one, but you get 51 multiplied by critical strike chance, and then you make that into a percent. So let me look here. If you do, what did I say, 40, let's say, okay, then 51, 40 times 51 is a huge number, but then you make that a percent. I don't think I'm even doing this right particularly. But yeah, so either way, math aside, I'm bad at math. Apologize, guys. My bad. Either way, the system with Ashe in place is that she's not going to randomly spike. She's going to consistently crit you, given that she's applied her passive to you, which if she's auto-attacked to, then yeah. So she can't crit on a first strike, but every strike after that has a ramping damage, or after she hits you with one of her spells. So this is a unique system, and honestly, I think this is probably a precursor to what Riot is going for with if they rehaul the crit chance system, okay? Because one of the problems that you face with the current crit chance system is that the damage is inconsistent and that AD carries don't have this steady ramping phase, okay? You are largely restricted in terms of what you can do as an AD carry based on how often you crit in a fight. A lot of times, you can have like excellent positioning, you can like just set up the perfect kite scenario and you're getting all your attacks out, but if you're sitting on just an Infinity Edge, and then with that 20% crit chance, you throw out 7 crits in a row, and then none of them crit, you're just not going to deal any damage. There is no effective increase in your auto attacks aside from the extra 80, which might not be enough for the fight. As a tank is, definitely going to have armor at this point. Okay, he might have armor, he might have built magic resist for the AP matchup, but he's got health at the very least, so he's going to be tankier in that way. Meanwhile, no other carry role in the game is going to have that doesn't have this issue. Mages don't have this random multiplier on their spells. A few of them do, but they're not reliant on the random multiplier to deal out the most majority of their damage. LeBlanc is always going to burst you for the same amount. And AD carry is not always going to auto-attack you for the same amount of damage unless they get up to a full 100% crit chance or have no crit chance to begin with, which is just a fairly poor system to really be in. It hurts the consistency of how often an AD carry can carry in team fights, and it really just, it's random. It's random is what it is, and it's a part of the game that isn't skill based, which can either which can completely sway the game, not in any favor that anyone's earned, just based on how the numbers play on out. That's a huge problem within the crit system. So what I am hoping happens, I won't say that this is going to be happening, but just playing off of what we've seen here, okay, Ash has been reworked to have this different kind of crit chance system, this different kind of crit scaling system in place that focuses on consistent boosted auto attack damage. So what I want to see happen is that we go into a system where your damage as an AD carry is going to consistently be at a certain level. Either you have to use a certain spell, set up a certain kind of passive on an enemy, and then you get all this extra damage. Think of Twitch, for example. Whenever you apply your toxin into an enemy, then you will critically damage them like Ash would. So, and it will have that, like that 10 plus the critical strike chance plus your bonus critical damage, so maybe there might be a little system coming into there with more items that boost critical damage or crit strike, something like that. Who knows what it could really go for. But moving into that system is going to give a lot more power to like the AD carry position. There's going to be a steadier ramp cycle, all right, because then you're not going for a more of an erratic early game when you have very little crit chance, so the likes of you landing some crits in important team fights isn't going to be as likely, and then you get to the late game where you can at least consistently get a couple crits in there. Instead, you can consistently get this increase in damage as the game goes on, and then that damage just gets improved and improved, and then you always attack at that particular level. That's just going to be overall a healthier state for the game to be in. It's going to be a healthier place for the role to be in. That's what I personally hope for. If they do go the system like this, maybe they won't have a go up to an extra, 250% multiplier, so like a 2.5 multiplier. But who knows? Maybe it will be a little less than that. But if you keep in mind this, okay, if it is less than that, you're still going to be dealing more damage, because then you're not going to have the consistency factor bringing down that average. Okay, if you crit for 300 against a tank every 2 auto attacks, for example, in a team fight, and then your other attack is like 100, is like 150. Okay, you're not going to be dealing 350 attack. Whereas though, if your damage is going to be about let's say 250 in attack, okay, yes, you're not dealing that 300 spike, but you're also not going down to that 150 low. You're consistently dealing that level of damage, and that's just throwing out numbers just to kind of illustrate the point that I'm trying to make here. Okay, so how could they really apply this to other marksmen? I mean, again, maybe they just rework the whole crit system so that doesn't work like that. Now, yes, Yasuo would have to be changed based on how his particular crit works within the game, but, who knows about that? As well as some other champions that have differences with how they crit, perhaps, like Shaco, for example. Perhaps if they don't rework that whole crit thing, which I think they are going to be touching it in some way, maybe they just make it so that the crit interacts with Marksman in that particular way, so then you just don't have the situation where like a melee assassin like Zed can build these ramping damage items and suddenly they're just hitting you like this truck. So maybe then, just to make sure that crit only really applies to Marksman and to champions who are going to be building those things like that it's going to be focused on. I mean, granted, Infinity Edge can kind of be built already like that. The attack speed item's not really on Zed, as just to address my example. But maybe instead they can just focus it so that, okay, only these champions are going to have this interaction with crit, so then if you try and build crit on these other champions, it's not going to really work for you because it's tied to these specific passives. Maybe they're going to do something like that. I mean, who really knows? I mean, there's a lot of changes coming on in. I'm interested to see where they go, if they touch lifesteal, if they touch armor penetration items, if they bring in more cast oriented items for like your Ezreals, your Corkis, your Lucians. I mean, either way, this is a pretty, even though there's not much to go on right now, there might be a few things that we could look at and make some educated guesses just based on what Riot has done in the past as far as adjusting crit and AD carries goes. And so this could be a really exciting change for the game. I mean, if you consider the fact that a lot of what Riot has done with a lot of their reworks is bring champions into overall more balanceable states of play, more effective states of play. Granted, some of them can be released in really overpowered states, but then there's tools in there that they can actually go in and kind of bring the kit down, balance it out a little bit better, and still make the champion effective. But, so there's not this range between just broken OP and utter shit, or have a unique playstyle within the game. I think the recent Gangplank rework is a great example of that. And some of them do miss their mark, but for the most part, a lot of them do. So if the fact that they're touching basically an entire class of champions within a game, I'm hoping that this is the year that Riot really brings AD carries into a healthier position into the game, just to feel better to play as. A lot of people will complain about how weak AD carries feel, how weak AD carries are. I still think they're okay. I think they could be a little better, perhaps. This is coming from a person, though, who observes professional AD carries play, and they, you can get some dominant performances out of them. People like Imp, Deft. Those are like monstrous AD carries that can carry the game, like single-handedly, basically. But in solo queue, it doesn't really translate so well. And that's only, again, from my personal experiences, which isn't really indicative of the highest level of play, so we can disregard that as a point for me. But if Riot does go through with this, and they put it out at this point. If Riot goes after this particular, like this set of changes or something similar to it, focusing on making it so that AD carries are more reliable and consistent in how they deal damage and how they ramp up in terms of damage, then the AD carry is overall going to be just a stronger role to play as, and it's going to be in a much more fun position to be in. It's been fairly stagnant and stale. Again, when they've done like role-based rehauls, I've generally been like a fan of it. I've been a huge fan of like how they rework supports. Now, clearly, again, because you can't flood the map with wards, then your supports can't really carry. That's why we don't see a whole lot of them in like the top 5 or 10 on solo queue anymore. So that does limit it, but it's a healthier environment, especially for competitive play. The fact that you're playing with a limited resource. So I'm excited for this particular rework coming up. I don't know what it is yet. My opinions could change if they unveil what it is, and it turns out like Riot is just like officially, eternally just like anti-AD carry bias, and they just all drive them to the ground, or they make them all melee. It's like, now Mordekaiser was our prototype for the project of making the range marksman as these up-in-your-face dilettantic... I'm not even sure that's a freaking word, but, what you thinking of that word, their company. These dilettantic, just wankers that are just going to pound you in the face. And just like, that just sounds like a horrible freaking design concept, and I really hope they don't go with something like that. So, up in the air for right now. Not a whole lot to say about it, but maybe there's a couple hints that exist within the game already that can point us out to something really cool. Ultimately, I'm excited for it. I think Riot has done a good job when it comes to making champions play in a unique fashion, having a better identity overall, rather than just like, do we play Lucian or Graves? Which one's stronger? They're basically the same thing. I think it's Lucian right now. Then we play Lucian, my friend. Is Lucian banned? Yeah, okay, then we're going to play Graves. Who's who anymore in this perspective? I don't even know, mate. That's what it's going to that's kind of like how it is right now. So I'm really excited for these upcoming reworks. I'm hoping they go pursue to make the AD carry a more unique role to play, a more fun role to play, and a more just powerful role to play. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hope it interested you. Hope it entertained you. Peace out.